Hare Krishna, my dear devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today we're hearing from Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text 42, which says, Sarvabhuteshu Chatmana, Sarvabhutani Chatmani, except Ananya Bhavina Bhutesh Iva Tad Atmatam. A yogi should see the same soul in all manifestations, for all that exists is a manifestation of different energies of the Supreme. In this way, the devotee should see all living entities without distinction. That is realization of the Supreme Soul. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, not only does the Supreme Soul enter each and every universe, but he enters even the atoms. The Supreme Soul is present everywhere in the dormant stage, and when one sees the presence of the Supreme Soul everywhere, one is liberated from material designations. The word Sarvabhutesu is to be understood as follows. There are 4 different divisions of species. Living entities which sprout from the earth, living entities born of fermentation or germination, living entities which come from eggs and living entities which come from the embryo. These 4 divisions of living entities are expanded in 8,400,000 species of life. A person who is freed from material designations can see the same quality of spirit present everywhere or in every manifested living entity. Less intelligent men think that plants and grass grow out of the earth automatically. But one who is actually intelligent and has realized self can see that this growth is not automatic. The cause is the soul, and the forms come out in material bodies under different conditions. By fermentation in the laboratory, many germs are born, but this is due to the presence of the soul. The material scientist thinks that eggs are lifeless, but that is not a fact. From Vedic scriptures, we can understand that living entities in different forms are generated under different conditions. Birds evolve from eggs, and beasts and human beings are born from the embryo. The perfect vision of the yogi or devotee is that he sees the presence of a living entity everywhere. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So Sarvabhutesu Chatmanam, Sarvabhutani Chatmani, Iksetanya Bhavena, Bhutesu Iva Tad Atmatam. A yogi should see the same soul in all manifestations. For all that exists is a manifestation of different energies of the Supreme. In this way, the devotee should see all living entities without distinction. That is realization of the Supreme Soul. Well, when it says that the devotee should see all living entities without distinction, that is realization of the Supreme Soul. Well, there are different species. So, but in every species, the living entity is present, or living entities are present. So it could be a dog, a cat, an elephant, an ant. The devotee sees the presence of the super soul in all those different forms of living entities. He doesn't see, he understands that the living entity is present in all those different forms. The elephant, the ant, the giraffe, and the snake, they're all living entities. And there's a spiritual spark or the spiritual soul present in each. And in each of these myriad types of living entities, there is the desire to self existence. So if you threaten the snake will try and protect itself. If you threaten the dog will try and protect itself. If you threaten a human being will try and protect itself. That's why it says here that one second. Okay, it says, less intelligent men think that plants and grass grow out of the earth automatically. But one who is actually intelligent and has realized the self can see that this growth is not automatic. The cause is the soul, and the forms come out in material bodies under different conditions. By fermentation in the laboratory, many germs are born, but this is due to the presence of the soul. The material scientist thinks that eggs are lifeless, but that is not a fact. From Vedic scripture, we can understand that living entities in different forms are generated under different conditions. Birds evolve from eggs, and beasts and human beings are born from the embryo. The perfect vision of the yogi or devotee is that he sees the presence of the living entity everywhere. Okay. So some germs are born from sweat and so forth. So what is important is that there are living entities everywhere. Mm-hmm. There are living entities that live in fire also, which is hard to believe, but it's a fact. And there are living entities in every planet of the universe. There are living entities even in the most severe conditions. They have found living entities in the North Pole and at the bottom of the North Pole. In other words, let's say at the North Pole there's ice or there's water. They found living entities in those most severe situations. So there are living entities everywhere, not only on the earth, but in the whole universe. And this is something that is miraculous. It's how living entities can live in all these different conditions. Okay. So a yogi should see the same soul in all manifestations. For all that exists is a manifestation of different energies of the Supreme. In this way, the devotees should see all living entities without distinction. That is realization of the Supreme Soul. Well, it's not that the soul of an animal or a human being are different. No, that spiritual spark is the same, whether it's an animal or a snake or a human being. And therefore, In this way, the devotee should see all living entities without distinction. That is realization of the Supreme Soul. That means that all living entities have a right to live. They have the right to also protect themselves. So we should therefore respect the desire of living entities to live, like ants and elephants and so forth. If they're attacked, they'll try and protect themselves. So the interesting thing here is right at the first sentence. It says, as stated in the Brahma Samhita, not only does the Supreme Soul enter each and every universe, but he enters even the atoms. Okay, so the Supreme Soul is present everywhere in the dormant stage, and when one can see the presence of the Supreme Soul everywhere, one is liberated from material designations. Yeah. So living entities are everywhere in the creation, even in the most, let's say, most unfavorable material conditions, such as in the bottom of the ocean, there's still living entities. And on the bottom of the North Pole, there are living entities. In fact, scientists were surprised. They noticed that there were many different types of living entities on the bottom of the North Pole. With the North Pole, it's very cold, but yet there were all kinds of different species. I'm not sure look that up. Different species discovered on the bottom of the North Pole. Okay. So there are 4 different divisions of species. Living entities that sprout from the earth. Living entities born of fermentation and germination. Living entities which come from eggs, and living entities which come from the embryo. These 4 divisions of living entities are expanded in 8,400,000 species of life. A person who's freed from material designations can see the same quality of spirit present everywhere or in every manifested living entity. Less intelligent men think that plants and grass grow out of the earth automatically, but one who is actually intelligent and has realized the self can see that this growth is not automatic. Yeah, of course, there are seeds. You don't see the seeds, but they are definitely present. The cause is the soul, and the forms come out in material bodies under different conditions. By fermentation in the laboratory, many germs are born, but this is due to the presence of the soul. The material scientists think that eggs are lifeless, but that is not a fact. From Vedic scriptures, we can understand that living entities in different forms are generated under different conditions. Birds evolve from eggs. The beasts and human beings are born from the embryo. The perfect vision of yogi or devotee is that he sees the presence of the living entity everywhere. What does it say?
Recent explorations in the Arctic's deep sea environments have led to the discovery of several new species adapted to extreme conditions. Notable among these are threadfin snailfish, found at the depth of 2,461 meters in the Ventfield. This species is distinguished by delicate whisker-like barbels that serve as sensory organs, aiding navigation in the dark Arctic waters.
Yeah, there's no sunlight, but still there are living entities. It's unbelievable.
Hairy decapod shrimp, Inhabiting depths around 3000 meters near hydrothermal vents in the Jotel vent field, this shrimp exhibits hair-like structures that are actually colonies of bacteria. These bacteria convert toxic hydrogen sulfide from the vents into energy, showcasing a unique symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, there's no sunlight, but they can still exist. In the
This
bottom of the
discovery
Arctic Ocean. The bottom of the Arctic Ocean, just imagine, there are a whole bunch of living entities.
This discovery adds to the over 160 known species of Monstreloida, tiny marine organisms that play a crucial role in ocean ecosystems. These findings highlight the rich and diverse life forms that inhabited the depths of the Arctic Ocean, many of which are still being uncovered by ongoing scientific research.
Right, they're still finding new things that they didn't know,
They didn't even
new
discover.
species that they didn't know.
They didn't discover.
It's unbelievable. It's such severe conditions. There's still living entities that have adapted to those conditions. So therefore, there are living entities everywhere, even in fire. Look that up. Even in fire. So usually, if you want, let's say there's a needle, and you want to purify it before you want to, stick it into your skin for something, right? And people usually put some get a match, and they put it on a needle to purify it. But that doesn't kill all the living entities or the germs. People think that they clean or they get rid of all the germs when they put a match to the needle, right? But they're living entities that survive such severe conditions. It's hard to believe, but it's a fact. So then usually people will try and purify something with alcohol and sometimes with fire, right? But the germs exist even after being submitted to such conditions.
Fire itself is not a living entity, it's a chemical reaction involving.
What? Fire?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Fire itself is not a living entity, it's a chemical reaction involving combustion. However, some organisms can live in environments with extreme heat, like those near volcanic vents or forest fires. These are called thermophiles, a type of extremophile that thrives in high temperature conditions. Living entities associated with fire, thermophilic microorganisms. Thermophilic microorganisms. Certain bacteria and archaea can survive in environments with high heat, like geothermal vents or hot springs, but they don't live directly in the flames of a fire. Fire-dependent plants. Some plants, like certain species of pine trees, have evolved to depend on fire for reproduction. Their cones only release seeds after being exposed to the heat of a fire. Pyrophilic insects. Certain insects are attracted to the heat and smoke of wildfires. For example, fire beetles in the genus Melanophilia have heat-sensitive organs that detect fires from miles away. They lay their eggs in freshly burned wood. While there are no known life forms that exist directly in fire, some species have developed ways to thrive in fire-prone or high-temperature environments. Would you like more information on extremophiles?
Wow.
I have from the Veda base. Yes, living entities can exist in fire. In Vedic literature, it is explained that living entities are present in all elements, including fire, but their forms and capacities differ. Bhagavad Gita mentions that the soul is indestructible and beyond harm from fire, water, any material element. The presence of entities within fire specifically is often cited in the context of celestial beings. such as the Agni Devata and other subtle forms of life suitable for such an environment. Srila Prabhupada in his purports also emphasizes that material nature, under the direction of the Lord, accommodates life in various elements, including fire.
How do you know?
Oh, like
So you don't really purify a needle by putting a match to it.
Yeah.
Which is what some people do before they want to poke themselves. They'll put a match to the needle.
Why would they want to fight themselves?
Well, you might have a splinter
Oh.
or something like that.
Why just use a tweezer?
What?
Tweezer.
What?
Just use a tweezer, right?
Well, you try it. You're gonna have to cut the skin to get the splinter out. So some people will put a match to a pin to purify it. So they think that they purify it, and then they'll try and get the splinter out after putting a match to the needle.
But then it's gonna be hot, right?
Well, they'll wait till it cools off, but they think that they are sterilizing the needle. Okay, sterilizing the needle with fire, but the facts are that there are some microscopic living entities that are not disturbed by the fire.
Yes.
It's pretty hard to believe, but it's a fact. Okay, so now we're in text 43. Sarvayonasu yata jyotir ekam nana pratiyate yo inam guna vaisamyat tatatma pakrito stitaha. As fire is exhibited in different forms of wood, so under different conditions of the modes of material nature, the pure spirit soul manifests itself in different bodies. Purport by Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada. It is to be understood that the body is designated. Okay. In other words, it's unique, or it has certain qualities. Prakriti is an interaction by the three modes of material nature. And according to these modes, someone has a small body and someone has a very large body. For example, the fire in a big piece of wood appears very big, and in a stick, the fire appears small. Actually, the quality of fire is the same everywhere, but the manifestation of material nature is such that according to the fuel, the fire appears bigger and smaller. Similarly, the soul in the universal body, although of the same quality, is different from the soul in the smaller body. The small particles of soul are just like sparks of the larger soul. The great soul is the super soul, but the super soul is quantitatively different from the small soul. The super soul is described in the Vedic literature as the supplier of all necessities of the smaller soul. Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanya Chaitananam. One who understands this distinction between super soul and the individual soul is above lamentation and is in a peaceful position. When the smaller soul thinks himself quantitatively as big as the larger soul, he's under the spell of Maya, for that is not his constitutional position. No one can become the greater soul simply by mental speculation. The smallness or greatness of different souls is described in the Varaha Purana as Swamsa Vibhinamsa. The Swamsa soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Vibhinamsa souls, or small particles, are eternally small particles, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Ramai-vamsa Jiva-loke, Jiva-bhuta Sanatana. The small living entities are eternally part and parcel, and therefore it is not possible for them to be quantitatively as great as the supersoul. So the smallness or greatness of different souls is described in the Varaha Purana as Swamsa Vibhinamsa. Swamsa soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Vibhinamsa soul, or small particles, are eternally small particles. So sometimes on a sunny day, when the sun is shining through the window where there is some windows there are what do you call this? There is what's the name of that? It's there's a screen with little holes, right? When the light goes through that screen with little holes, you can see. You see something. Okay, look that up. When sunlight goes through a screen, something happens. You can see something that you would not see normally. When light goes through a screen with a lot of little holes.
Colors,
Huh?
colors.
I'm not sure. See what it says.
I think it's atoms.
What?
Atoms.
Yeah, you can see the existence of atoms. Is that what it says?
No, I remember from your previous lectures when we were talking. There was one chapter in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
It was talking about how Prabhupada said that you could see like 6 atoms or something parted together. You could see it. You could see it if you look hard enough.
Oh, let's look that up. Yeah, when you have a screen with little holes in it, and then light comes through it. You can't see one atom, but you can see a collection of atoms.
Like a wave,
Huh?
light wave.
Light what?
Wave.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What does the elephant in the room say? You can't see one atom, but you can see a collection of atoms.
I think I can just remember the number 6 atoms. I'm pretty sure. Or 60 atoms.
I think it's called Trisarenu. Like it's in one of the Bhagavatam time chapters. I think 3 atoms together is called one Trisarenu. Can we search for that?
I think it was 6 atoms together.
It's called diffraction, light diffraction,
Okay,
or interference through a screen with holes.
right.
And here in the Veda base, it's saying it's dust particles. which are made out of atoms.
which are atoms.
Like everything has atoms, right? So the dust particles will also have atoms.
Okay, so it says here, the smallness or greatness of different souls is described in the Varaha Purana as Swamsa Vivinamsa. The Swamsa soul is the Supreme Personality of God, and the Vivinamsa souls, or the small particles, are eternally small particles, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mamayavamsa, Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta, Sanatana. The small living entities are eternally part and parcel, and therefore it is not possible for them to be quantitatively as great as the Supreme Soul. All right, so living entity's soul is microscopic, actually.
But when the light passes through the
What?
crystals,
Okay.
it's how it sounds.
Oh, okay. Broken down into
Little rays of light, waves of light.
As per the Bhagavatam, it says, third canto, chapter 11, verse 1 through 4, it explains that 3 double atoms form a hex atom, 6 atoms, which becomes visible when illuminated by sunlight passing through a window screen.
Okay. So you can't see one atom, but you can see 6 atoms. Okay.
So a single atom is the smallest indivisible unit of
Indivisible.
material. Yeah, indivisible unit of material substance.
But you can't see it though.
Yeah.
But when there's 6 atoms together, then you can begin to see it. Is that
So
right?
here it says 3 double atoms.
Double means 6.
Yeah, 3 double atoms means 6 of them, which forms a hex atom, which is visible to the naked eye when light passes through a window screen.
Wow.
Interestingly, Bhagavatam already disclosed 2 atoms together make Vyad, and scientists say that 2 atoms together make a molecule.
Make a what?
Molecule.
A molecule. Okay. All right. I'll go on the text 44. Tasmat imam swam akritim vim sat asat atmikam tur vibhagyam parabhavya swarupen na vatistate. Thus, the yogi can be in the self-realized position after conquering the insurmountable spell of Maya, who presents herself as both the cause and effect of this material manifestation and is therefore very difficult to understand. Wow, this is an important verse. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that the spell of Maya, which covers the knowledge of the living entity, is insurmountable. However, one who surrenders unto Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can conquer the seemingly insurmountable spell of Maya. Here also it is stated that the Daivi Prakriti, or the external energy of the Supreme Lord, is Durvibhavya, very difficult to understand and very difficult to conquer. One must, however, conquer this insurmountable spell of Maya, and this is possible by the grace of the Lord when God reveals himself to the surrendered soul. It is also stated here, Swarupen na vatistate. Swarupa means that one has to know that he is not the Supreme Soul, but rather part and parcel of the Supreme Soul. That is self-realization. To think falsely that one is the Supreme Soul and that one is all-pervading is not Swarupa. This is not realization of his actual position. The real position is that one is part and parcel. It is recommended here that one remain in that position of actual self-realization. In Bhagavad Gita, this understanding is defined as Brahman realization. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the activities of Brahman. As long as one is not self-realized, he engages in activities based on false identification with the body. When one is situated in his real self, then the activities of Brahman realization begin. The Mayavadi philosophers say that after Brahman realization, all activities stop, but that is not actually so. If the soul is so active in its abnormal condition, existing under the covering of matter, how can one deny its activity when free? An example may be cited here. If a man is diseased, in a diseased condition, if a man in a diseased condition is very active, how can one imagine that when he is free from the disease, he will be inactive? Naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those of conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 1854. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. Okay, when it says when you realize yourself as Brahman, then it says an example may be cited here. If a man in a diseased condition is very active, how can one imagine that when he is free from the disease, he will be inactive? Naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those of conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 1854. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, whenever it says Brahman, it means spiritual. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 1854. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. Mad Bhaktyam Labhate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. So this is different than what Mayavadis believe. They believe that one has to stop all activity, because if there's activity, there's going to be karma, according to the Mayavadis. And karma is entangling oneself in the laws of material nature. But the Mayavadis don't understand that active participation in the activities of the Lord are not contaminated. So devotees will engage in devotional service, and Mayavadis will engage in silent meditation. So, and that meditation is not necessarily on Krishna. It can be on either nothingness, or it can be on some
Light.
somewhat light, for example. So the meditation of a devotee is active meditation. When they're engaging in serving the deities, that is active meditation. But the Mayavadis believe that one must be in a solitary place where there's no, let's say, influence of light or sound or whatever, and they meditate. And what do they meditate on? It could be the tip of their nose, or it could be something else, or it can be on nothing. So that's obviously very difficult to achieve. Therefore, it's limited. It's not an eternal situation. Whereas a devotee can meditate eternally on the Supreme Personality of Godhead while doing devotional service, while being active. Whereas the Mayavadis, they want to give up activity and thought and meditate on either nothingness or the tip of their nose or something like that. So there's a complete difference between the Mayavadis and the devotees. So by active devotional service, one is meditating on Krishna. That is type of meditation, active devotional service. And that's to please the Lord. So the Mayavadi would say, well, no, that's not real meditation. Real meditation is you have to go be in a private place and meditate without any diversion of the mind. But that's one way. But there's another way, is you have complete consciousness of Krishna, and you're engaging in Krishna's service to please the Lord. So that is another form of meditation. So that the meditation that is doable and unchanging meditation is devotional service to the Lord. Whereas the silent meditation can be interrupted easily. Like you look at different yogis. There's the yogi meditating underwater, and then a school of fish came near him, and the fish were having sex, and it disturbed the yogi, and immediately it broke his meditation. So that's a severe type of meditation, meditating underwater, right? But that doesn't mean that one is purified. You might think someone is purified by doing that, but no. One is purified by being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. That means there's activity, and at the same time, there's contemplation. So one is keeping the mind focused on Krishna and how to please Krishna, and there's activity to do that. So that is another type of meditation. It's active meditation as opposed to silent meditation. So the active meditation is more doable for the devotee than the silent meditation of the Mayavadi. Okay, so here it says, after Brahman realization. So, okay, Brahman always means the truth of Krishna. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the activities of Brahman as long as one is not self-realized. He engages in activities based on false identification with the body. When one is situated in his real self, then the activities of Brahman realization begin. The Mayavadi philosophers say that after Brahman realization, all activities stop, but that is not actually so. If the soul is so active in its abnormal condition, existing under the covering of matter, how can one deny his activity when free? An example may be cited here. If a man in a diseased condition is very active, how can one imagine that when he is free from the disease, he will be inactive? Naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those of the conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. So Brahman means this realization, I'm not this body, realization, I'm the soul, right? So Mad Bhaktim Lapate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. So the Mayavadi would say that you have to give up all activity. And you also have to give up all thoughts to be free of karma. But the devotee understands that being an active devotional service, one becomes free of karma. So karma means activity, basically. But there's purified activity and there's contaminating activity. So if one engages only in purified activity, which is devotional service, there is no karma. But if they engage in contaminated activities like meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, there's plenty of karma. So how do we differentiate the two? The Mayavadis think, well, no, give up all activity, there won't be any karma. Right? But no, giving up all activity still is subject to karma. Why? Because you're not engaging in devotional service. If you engage in devotional service without any material motive, there is no karma. It's called akarma. If you engage in silent meditation, you're still making karma because you have not. Well, it depends on what you meditate on, but you're not engaged in active devotional service. So that's why it says, for those who engage in devotional service, there's no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as a part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole. That is the ultimate perfection of life. Okay, well, that's the conclusion right there. The silent meditation of the Mayavadi is not as pure as the active meditation of the devotee engaged in devotional service for the Lord. There's a world of difference between those two types of meditation. Mad Bhaktin Lapate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. On the other hand, the Mayavadi will try and stop activities, but the devotee purifies activities. That's the difference. Purified activities is meditating always on the Supreme Lord through activities of devotional service. So there's a difference between the Mayavadi meditation and a devotee meditation. So that's why it says, it may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those of conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 1854. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, meaning spiritual, Brahman in spiritual, devotional service begins. Mad Bhaktin Labdhate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. For those who engage in devotional service, there's no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as a part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole. That is the ultimate perfection of life. Well, what is the whole? The whole is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not something impersonal. Thus, send the Bhaktivinoda Purport to the 3rd canto, 28th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. Any questions? It says here, the Mayavadi philosophers say that after Brahman realization, all activities stop. But that is not actually so. If the matter, it says, if the soul is so active in its abnormal condition, existing under the covering of matter, how can one deny its activity when free? An example may be cited here. If a man in disease condition is very active, how can one imagine that when he is free from the disease, he will be inactive? That's a nice example.
Yes,
Naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization, and whenever it says Brahman, it's talking about spiritual, or something that's spiritual, is different from those of conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 1854. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. Mad Bhaktin Labdhate. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. For those who engage in devotional service, there is no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as a part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole, or the whole spelled W-H-O-L-E rather than H-O-L-E. The whole means Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the ultimate perfection of life. Okay, any questions? So, takeaway today. It said, it is stated that the Daivi Prakriti, or the external energy of the Supreme Lord, is durvibhavya, very difficult to understand, and very difficult to conquer. One must, however, conquer this insurmountable spell of Maya. And this is possible. by the grace of the Lord, when God reveals himself to the surrendered soul. It is also stated here, Swarupin Avitistate. Swarupa means that one has to know that he is not the Supreme Soul, but rather part and parcel of the Supreme Soul. That is self-realization. To think falsely that one is the Supreme Soul and that one is all-pervading is not Swarupa. This is not realization of his actual position. So Swarupa is, what is your actual position? What is your Swarupa? The real position is that one is part and parcel. One is not the Supreme Soul. One is not Krishna. It is recommended here that one remain in that position of actual self-realization. In Bhagavad Gita, this understanding is defined as Brahman realization. So Brahman realization is not I am God. Brahman realization is that I am the supreme, I am the eternal servant of God. So the Mayavadis, they believe that somehow or other they become God. One time this man, one man was talking to me and he said, you know who I am? I said, no, I never, I don't know who you are. I never met you before. So he gave me a card, right, like this. And the card had said that so-and-so is certified incarnation of God. He said, now you understand who I am? I said, well, wait a minute. I said, can you tell me something? He said, what is it? He said, how did you become God? He said, well, I smoked some marijuana and I did some yoga exercises and I became God. I said, well, now I know that you are a fake and you are not God. He said, how can you say such a thing? I said, because God is always God. He doesn't become God by smoking marijuana and doing some exercises. So therefore, you are not God.
God is always God.
And he's saying certified Maharaj
He was certified.
to be a god.
Well, he was a Rosicrucian or one of those movements, and they gave him this card saying that he's certified God. Yeah. But I told him, you don't become God. God is always God. Yeah, he was surprised by that. But that's a fact. Nobody becomes God. Either you're God or you're not God, right? So if he says he became God, that means he's a fake.
This one statement gives so much clarity that whoever is claiming they are God, they are
not God. Yeah. God is never, someone who has to become God. He's always God. Okay, so I think we will stop right there unless there are questions. Anybody have a question?
No online question, Maharaj.
Huh?
No online question yet.
The takeaway here is when it says, naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those of conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, okay, whenever it says Brahman, it means spiritual. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. Mad Bhaktim Labdhate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization. For those who engage in devotional service, there is no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as a part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole. The whole meaning Krishna. That is the ultimate perfection of life. Thus, and the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 28th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So whenever it says Brahman, it means spiritual. Look that up. What does the word Brahman mean? It has different meanings, actually.
So I'm searching on our Prabhupada books.
Yeah.
On that ChatGPT. It says the word Brahman is Vedic literature, refers to the absolute truth, the ultimate reality that is eternal, unchanging, and the source of everything. Brahman is often described as the impersonal aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and represents the eternal, infinite, and transcendental energy of the divine. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explains the relationship between Brahman, Paramatma, means the super soul, and Bhagwan, the Supreme Person. The Bhagavad Gita 10.12 reveals that Lord Krishna is Param Brahma, the Supreme Brahman, indicating that the impersonal Brahman is a subordinate manifestation of Krishna's divine nature. So just keep giving more and more detail.
Yeah, real Brahman realization is realization of Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. That's full Brahman realization. It's not just through the light. It's not only the light. It's Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. That is the full Brahman realization. If you only have Brahman realization, you can fall down. If you have Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan realization, you will not fall down. You see, now this is the major difference between Mayavadis and devotees. When one is situated in its real self, then the activities of Brahman realization begin. The Mayavadi philosophers said that after Brahman realization, all activities stop. That's the difference. But that is not actually so. If the soul is so active in its abnormal condition, existing under the covering of matter, how can one deny its activity when free? And an example may be cited here. If a man in disease condition is very active how can one imagine that when he is free from a disease, he will be inactive? Naturally, the conclusion is that when one is free from all disease, his activities are pure. It may be said that the activities of Brahman realization are different from those of conditional life, but that does not stop activity. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 1854. After one realizes oneself to be Brahman, devotional service begins. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. After Brahman realization, one can engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord is activity in Brahman realization, or spiritual realization. For those who engage in devotional service, there is no spell of Maya, and their situation is all perfect. The duty of the living entity as part and parcel of the whole is to render devotional service to the whole. That is the ultimate perfection of life. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 28th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Kapula's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. So tomorrow we'll begin chapter 29, and it's entitled Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapila. Wow, I can't wait till tomorrow to hear that. Okay, so thank you very much, my dear devotees. And get ready for tomorrow, the explanation of devotional service by Lord Kapila. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram,
Hare Ram, Ram Ram,
Hare Hare.
Srila Prabhupada
Ki
Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.